I'm Natasha Moore. I'm speaking with Gordon Menzies and Richard Shumack. Gordon, your book is Western Fundamentalism, Democracy, Sex and the Liberation of Mankind. Richard is the author of Jesus Through Muslim Eyes. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha.
Tell me here, who is your book for? I want to kind of know a bit about who you think of as your audience for each of these books and why that audience matters to you. Gordon, how about we start with you?
Sure. Well, I didn't come from a Christian background, and when I'm talking with people who aren't Christians, the most natural audience for me in my conversations is people who are pretty far from Christianity and don't have much sympathy with it or background with it. So the book, I guess, arises out of that interest of mine, and quite a few parts of the book actually are taken from lectures really that I gave to my classes on ethics and economics and some of the things associated. So partly the book is directed at a general audience that's pretty far away from Christianity, but secondarily, it's also directed at Christians. I put forward some ideas about having good conversations, and I hope to model those ideas in the way that I write the book. One example of that is that I really try and hear very carefully voices that have completely different ideas to me and write about them through the book, and then only really talk about my own ideas right at the end.
We'll come back to that actually. Richard, how about you? Who is your book for?
Well, it's broadly similar to Gordon's in the sense that it's not for Christians. It's a book about Jesus for Muslims, basically. But also, like Gordon's, it's one that I imagine the actual audience will be Christians buying it. If it helps them, if it helps the average Christian have a conversation about Jesus with their Muslim friend or workmate, then brilliant. Even better if they could give it to their Muslim friends to read, that'd be great. That's who it's for.
And this is a community of people that they matter to you. You have experience with working with Muslims. How does kind of your personal experience and backstory feed into the book that you've written?
Well, I spent well over a decade living and working in a Muslim community. And it's funny, like I'm not interested in Islam per se, but I got a lot of friends who are Muslims, and I just wanted to talk to them about God and about Jesus and about life and about faith. And so that's where the interest came from, and it's ended up as a book. I never had any intention of writing a book or studying Islam or doing any of that. But yeah, really it just came down to wanting to have better conversations with my Muslim neighbours when they didn't seem to be smooth. It's like we seem to miss each other. So this is an attempt to not miss.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at, because I think you're an excellent writer, Richard, but you're a very kind of reluctant one. You're like, oh, why must I write a book? Whereas for you, Gordon, what kind of drove you to write it? You've been writing yours for a really long time, right?
Yeah, it's taken me 20 years. I can't claim it's been continual effort, but yes, this book, a bit like Richard, it just arose really. I'm an academic economist teaching in university, and at various times I would feel a friction. Well, two things. I'd feel a friction between how I was trained to think as an economist and my Christian faith, but also I saw economic thinking leaking into all sorts of areas where it shouldn't go, in my opinion. So the book was my personal journey or struggle or whatever you want to call it with that, and trying to work out what I think about that.
I mean, that's fascinating because it feels rare to have a combination in a book of such kind of personal import, coupled with some really big concepts, kind of quite big philosophical ideas. And I think for both of your books, they're very different books, but something that's really bold about them, and I think not that common, is that they're genuinely written for people who fundamentally disagree with you. Would that be fair to say for both of you?
I think so.
In some things.
At
the most fundamental level, Muslims are probably the closest to Christians in their core beliefs about cosmology, the universe, about the creator, about justice, about morality. So I think that's true. But yeah, there are some pretty intense disputes, and a lot of the Quran is polemical against Christianity. So yeah, fundamental agreement, but with some pretty strident disagreement.
Let me quote you back at yourself here, Richard. You write in the book at one point that Muslims and Christians disagree profoundly about Jesus. You say, my experience is that many Muslims find this disagreement frustrating. It seems to me that they believe Christians and Muslims should agree more than we do, and they can't quite get why Christians don't feel the same way. My hunch is that much of this frustration stems from the fact that Muslims imagine Islam and Christianity to be very much the same sort of religion. Can you kind of explain how you approach common ground between Christians and Muslims, and even how Christians and Muslims can talk about Jesus in the book?
Oh, well, in the book, the way I do it is by starting with the existing range, and there is a range, existing range of beliefs that Muslims have about Jesus, and then try and expand it, crack it open. I think one of the reasons Muslims are frustrated is they find it hard to imagine Christianity. The theological imagination of Islam is much more constrained. Islam is much simpler, much less complex. Clearly, God is one, not three. There's one. And so what you're doing again and again is helping Muslims imagine possibilities, but you do it with the concepts that are already there. So you start with things that they do believe, and there are clues and possibilities that can unlock, that are keys to unlock that sort of imagination. But that's the approach. I'm hoping it's a slow burn book that will be, over time, get in the hands of Muslims. I'd love it to be translated too into Arabic or Indonesian or Persian, but yeah, it's early days. I play a very long game.
And Gordon, I mean, your book as well is quite hopeful about engagement with people who disagree very strongly. Like, you're quite, in some ways, quite confrontational about people's basic ideas about the world. But because your voice in the book is also very personal, I feel that is a very kind of hopeful way of inviting people into a conversation. I'm going to read you a bit of your own writing as well.
Okay.
There's, towards the end of the book, you say, with regards to any pessimism in this book about kind of Western culture, I do not consider myself pessimistic on a personal level. If I meet you, I'll shake your hand and trust you until I have a good reason not to, which is hopefully never. And I have tried to give credit where credit is due when outlining perspectives that differ from my own. While the title Christian is my basic descriptor, in the context of this book, perhaps Christian humanist is better, to build a bridge to a group of people whom I admire and whose values I share. I'm wondering kind of how you found people who are what you might term Western fundamentalists have engaged with your book, and whether this has been kind of a bridge building opportunity for you.
I found that because many of the discussions in the book dovetail with many discussions I've had over a long time, I can't answer it in response to the actual impact of the book, but I have found that one of the things that I agree with a lot of people on is the fundamental worth and equality of each human person, and I think that that's a result. I think that's partly a result of the Christian idea that we're created in God's image, and I think there are three fundamental pillars in Western fundamentalism, which are democracy, free market liberalism, and sexual freedom. And I say in the book that I think democracy is quite good at getting that fundamental equality of people, at least at voting booth time, whereas the other two are getting poorer and poorer. at getting it. So I share beliefs with non-Christian friends about the fundamental equality of people. And what I try and do in the book is ask, I guess, why they hold that. I know why I hold it, but I'm curious about why they hold it. And I'm also interested in how many people on the left who are very concerned about social justice, and rightly so in my view, when it comes to the sexual revolution, I find them strangely in favour of a kind of neoliberal mindset where people trade people and get rid of them when they're no longer of use. So these are the kinds of conversations I have with people who fundamentally disagree with me about the inherent worth of people and about some what I consider to be strange inconsistencies in people's attitude to the sexual revolution.
People don't always respond that well to being told that their beliefs are inconsistent, right?
People find it uncomfortable.
I'm actually in the opposite position, fortunately. So, like, I need conceptual touch points to talk to Muslims, but coming from a philosophy academic background, we love a good fight. We're more than happy to disagree, but also Muslims are completely happy to disagree as well. So it's not disagreement per se that's the issue. It's, again, trying to expand imaginations. So, I'm not precious about disagreement, and Muslims aren't either. And so that's really helpful if you want to disagree about things. And they care too. Like one of the things we have in common, Muslims believe in objective truth, and they believe in eternity, and they believe in a judgment day, and they believe that this stuff really matters. And so it's far more important to get that right than to be nicey about how you engage about things.
Yeah, I completely agree with Richard that when people feel that you care enough about what they're talking about to disagree with them, that's often more positive than disinterested tolerance, where people are just tuning out and they don't want to talk about something. It's actually it can almost be perceived as an insult if you're not prepared to engage with people. The other thing that I'd add from my book is that there are different sorts of disagreements, and a bit like when your car's not working, you're driving along, it's not working very well. You can either pump the accelerator harder, or you can pull over and have a look under the hood. And I think when people get into disagreement, sometimes what they do is they speak louder and faster, which is like pumping the accelerator. But pulling over is sometimes not a bad idea either, and looking under the hood and seeing what's underneath the detailed positions that people have, the kind of fundamental beliefs, hence the title Western fundamentalism.
I think we're all on board with the idea that engaging with people across lines of difference is not easy, but also valuable and important. And, preaching to the choir is not always the best way of going about things. Thank you both for the conversation, and also for your books and all the work behind them. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
Natasha.